So today, we are going to continue to make the exchange. And to get us started, I want to ask you a question. Feel free to just shout it out, okay? Just shout out any answer that comes to mind. Think about not just church folks, okay? Think about not just people who claim to be Christ followers or Christians when you shout out your answer, okay? So, let me ask you a question. What do you think might be the most quoted words of Jesus? Go ahead and shout one out. Everybody at the same time so you're not embarrassed. Go. Well, I heard John 3:16 right here. We see that one a lot, right? You go to any sporting event, you see that one. What was another one? Shout them out. Go, loud, loud, loud. Be still and know. That was a good one. Okay, anybody else? See, y'all are doing this thing like we're sitting next to each other and I can hear you. I said shout. Okay, let's try that. On three, everybody shout out what you think the most quoted words of Jesus are. 1, 2, 3. Still didn't understand you, but it worked better. Here we go. Let me just throw this out. I don't necessarily have scientific data to back it up, all right? But I think, without us even realizing it, the most quoted words of Jesus could actually just be 2 words. Judge not. Right? Like you go into society today and say anything about anything about anything. Like we live in a society that everybody gets upset over sneezing. Judge not. Well, you know, Jesus said don't judge. These are people who don't even necessarily believe in Jesus, but they will quote those words to you. Well, the Bible says you're not supposed to judge me, you silly Christian. It's one of those things that's kind of built into our society. And in part, that is the fault of Christians because many times we do come across very judgy. Right? So we know that that's accurate. Jesus did, in fact, say it. Luke, a doctor who recorded many of the events and words of Jesus, he said this. Matthew records something very similar. But look at this in Luke 6:37. Jesus did, in fact, say, judge not, and you will not be judged. It's right there. Condemn not, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. We see this same idea, the same principle, supported by the brother of Jesus, James, when he writes in his letter. We see it supported by Paul in many of his writings, where he says that we're not supposed to judge. But here's the thing. We can read in other letters by Paul that as Christians, we are supposed to judge, and we are supposed to carefully assess the behaviors of others, and that we're supposed to call sin what it is and lovingly correct, right? So what's the deal? We've got a contradiction here. Judge not, but then over here you're supposed to judge. What is it that we're supposed to do with this idea? Here's what we're getting at. When Jesus spoke these words, he wanted us to realize something very important. When he was saying to the crowds listening, judge not, he was not saying it was about the act of judging as much as it was the attitude behind it. Okay? Stick with me. He was not saying that it was about just blanketly don't judge. What he was saying is that we need to understand it's not about the action, it's about the attitude. Because it's the attitude that determines whether we're using Christian judgment or judgmental criticism. There is a big difference between Christian judgment and what most of the time we end up practicing, which is judgmental criticism. Well, I just call it like it is. You know, I just call a spade a spade. That's all there is to it. No, you're mean. Well, you know, Paul said that we're supposed to judge one another. Again, Christian judgment or judgmental criticism. That's what Jesus was saying to him. Interestingly enough, the very word that's used there in that passage in Luke and the one in Matthew, the word that's used for do not judge is the same word that we get our word critical. The same word, if you trace the word history of our word critical, we get it from that Greek word that was recorded there. So Jesus is saying, listen, I want you to stop with the criticism. Not judging one another in love, but stop with, here's the thing, stop arriving at decisions so swiftly about someone you barely know. Stop making a decision about who they are. That's what the word means. It means to decide upon, to arrive at a decision about. So today, we're going to exchange judgmental criticism, or what we're going to call a critical spirit. We're going to exchange a critical spirit today, and we're going to look at one of the best examples of this as we look at John chapter 8. If you have a Bible, if not, it'll be on the screen. We're going to go through it, try to read it quickly, and take this and break it down this morning. But Jesus went to the Mount of Olives early in the morning. He came again to the temple. All the people came to him, and he sat down and taught them. The scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in adultery. And placing her in the midst, they said to him, "Teacher, this woman has been caught in the act of adultery." Now in the law, Moses, here you go, just right off the bat. Now we're just going to let you know, Jesus, what the law says. In the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. So what do you say? This they said to test him, that they might have some charge to bring against him. And Jesus bent down and wrote with his finger on the ground. And as they continued to ask him, he stood up and said to them, "Let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw a stone at her." I love it when Jesus is like, "I dare you. Just go ahead. I double dog dare you. Throw that rock. I will smite you. Throw it." He says, "Let he who is without sin be the first to throw a stone." And once more he bent down and wrote on the ground. But when they heard it, they went away one by one, beginning with the older ones. And Jesus was left alone with the woman standing before him. Jesus stood up and said, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" And she said, "No one, Lord." And Jesus said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go, and from now on, sin no more." Again, Jesus spoke to them, saying, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." Great story. Great historical account of this moment where a group of people came forward in judgmental criticism with a critical spirit to make an accusation against someone. So, as we're talking through this today, there are some things we need to understand about a critical spirit, what it looks like in our lives, what it does to us, what it does to others. So, what is a critical spirit? How does it operate? The first thing I want you to jot down, if you're a note taker, if not, you should start. Pastor does some great messages. Start taking notes. You can practice with this one, okay? The first thing we need to understand about a critical spirit is this, plain and simple. A critical spirit just seeks to belittle others. That's all it does. Now, in the moment, it may feel like we're doing something good, but the end product is just that we're belittling someone else. If you notice how they referred to her in verse 4, these men come. Here's the thing. Get this picture in your head, okay? Just for a moment, just close your eyes. Everybody in the room, just close your eyes for a moment and get this in your head like a movie playing, okay? Here's this woman who is lying in a bed somewhere in the arms of a man, not her husband. Maybe she already feels a sense of guilt. Maybe not. Maybe she's already struggling with, this is wrong. I shouldn't be doing this. I shouldn't be in this relationship. Lying here in this bed, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, angry men come bursting through the door, grab her up out of the bed, hurling insults on her. Does she even have time to grab a sheet to wrap around her? We don't know. But as they cast these insults on her, suddenly she finds herself and her secret sin dragged out into the street, shoved through Jerusalem. The whole way, she hears these men behind her, around her, murmuring. They're talking about the law. They're talking about what she deserved. They're talking about how she would die. Until she is violently thrust into the temple before this young rabbi who's just there teaching. Now open your eyes. Can you imagine how degrading this must have been? Can you imagine how degrading as they threw her in there, into the temple? How degrading it must have been that they didn't even refer to her by a name or as a person. They just said, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. Moses tells us what we should do with such women. It's what we struggle with in our society today when we use phrases like, those people. That's what they had done to her. And we look at this story and we can't help but wonder who in the world would do something like this to another person? Who would have such a critical spirit that they would publicly bring someone out before all the world to see and call them out in such a manner? Right? It's shocking to us. Except we do the exact same thing. Let me show you some pictures, okay? These are real pictures from real posts on social media that I want you to see, okay? Do we have those? To the 3 teenage boys joyriding in a silver BMW. I don't even know what that is. I'm sorry that I wasn't going fast enough for you on unsaid road because I'll get in trouble. A little while ago, apparently speed limits do not apply to you. I know who was driving and I sincerely hope you slow down. Unless you would like me to come talk to your parents to let them know how you really drive on the main roads. Who would do such a thing? See, here's the thing. What's worse about our society now and why it's so easy to walk into this place of a critical spirit is because now, where this woman was dragged to the public square by someone with a face, now we get to be nameless, faceless cowards who call people to the town square of social media and make our judgments. Look, here's another one. This one I just thought was funny. Dear waitress, you blew off 2 of my son's kisses he blew to you. Joke's on you. There goes your tip. Blam. What? What's wrong with you? I got to be careful. I don't want to make a judgment about this person, but what? See, here's the thing. We laugh and we see this as kind of funny, but at the same time, it's exactly what was happening in this passage. And we may not do it on social media, but it's that critical spirit in us that makes us walk through the grocery store and see that kid that's throwing a temper tantrum, and then we look at someone with us and we're like, great parenting. Right? It's that critical spirit that causes us to send a correcting email to someone, making sure we copy their boss. It's that critical spirit that comes out and causes us to condemn people. And see, when we operate that way, what we're doing is we're making a decision. Hear me, please. We're making a decision about the totality of someone's life based on a snapshot. We're making a decision about who they are as a whole person based on one thing that we've seen without knowing the rest of the circumstance. At best, we make a decision about the totality of someone's life based on a situation we're repeatedly exposed to. And as a result, just like these men who burst through the door, dragged this woman out, condemned her and shamed her, we belittle others. Nothing productive about it. We just want to make them feel bad and know they were wrong. It's a critical spirit. We reduce them down to this moment in time and we render a verdict. And so what we do is we begin acting accordingly with them. We see someone as lazy. I'm not going to help them. God helps those who help themselves. They're lazy. I'm not helping them. All we know is some snapshot that we've seen. Well, they're in debt, so they're impulsive, they're irresponsible, and they probably can't be trusted. All we know is a snapshot. And so we utilize this judgment, this criticism of who they are. What happens is we become cold. We become callous to who they are as a person in the process of belittling them. It's not just that a critical spirit belittles them. This is the other thing that we need to catch. A critical spirit consumes us. Consumes us. Again, we have to understand what was going on in this situation. But for us, in this moment right now, criticism begins with nitpicking the little things, right? It's not that we immediately go attacking someone. That's not what we're going for. But it begins with those little, small things. Have you ever known someone like that it seems like every time they post something on social media, it's me. Or maybe it happened to you today. There's a little bit of a critical spirit in there. And one of the songs started, I can't stand it when they sing that song. Garrett, did you notice the awkward laughter? Yeah. Sorry, buddy. Yeah, just change that set list real quick. No, listen, maybe it's one of those things where you find yourself standing in the line at Walmart and why can't they open more lines at Walmart? They got 46 of them. There's only 3 of them open, and 2 of them are self-checkout. Ridiculous. Right? It begins with little things like that. Can't believe they changed the menu again. Why can't they just do what they know? But here's the danger. Y'all are laughing because all of y'all are like, he's talking about you. No, I'm talking about me. I saw y'all nudging one another. I'm talking about me. We all have that in us. The real danger comes when criticism invades our hearts and consumes us to the degree that we begin to dwell on every fault and every inconsistency, not just in a situation, but in a person, in someone's life. That critical spirit will eat us up, and we'll find ourselves constantly looking for things to pick apart. Well, that's wrong, they're wrong, they're a jerk. They're stupid. I can't believe they did that. It consumes us. Catch this in verse 4. Look at this. They said to Jesus, "Teacher, this woman has been" what? "Caught in the act." Excuse me, what? Caught in the act. Y'all do understand the complication of that one phrase, correct? Okay, all right, some of you aren't with me. This means that the Pharisees were all packed into a Ford LTD parked on the corner with some binoculars and some cheap cheese and ham sandwiches from the convenience store, so that they could have a stakeout to see when this woman would show up at his house or when this man would show up at her house, so they could catch her in the act. If you have nothing better to do with your life than catch someone in the act, you need to get a life. I know some of y'all are uncomfortable. I didn't write it. John did. Caught in the act. And here, listen, catch this. They were so consumed by a critical spirit, they would actually take time. These are supposed to be the religious leaders. They would take time to be like, oh, got him, caught him. But here's what's crazy. They were so consumed by it, they were looking for a 2-for-1 judgment. You notice in verse 4, she was caught in the act. But if you jump to verse 6, notice what it says. This they said to what? Test him, that they might have some charge to bring against him. They were so consumed by criticism, they wanted to catch her, bust her, so that they could bust Jesus. It had eaten away at their lives. It had come to the point where it actually defined who they were. Critical spirit belittles others. It consumes us. But here's the greatest concern. A critical spirit hinders the gospel. It hinders the gospel. This is where it matters, church. I think there may be some people in our world that are okay with belittling others. Maybe even in the church. Well, I just want them to know how wrong they are. There may be some people that are perfectly okay with being judge and jury, maybe even in the church. But what happens when we cross the line and now we are actually hindering the good news of Jesus Christ being communicated to a world that so desperately needs it, and very likely the very people that we're judging? A critical spirit hinders the gospel. You notice in verse 12 that Jesus, it says this, after all of this happened, after he said to this woman, neither do I condemn you, go now and sin no more. It says, and again Jesus spoke to them. It would be as though pastor were up here and he were preaching and teaching, and then somebody from within the church dragged someone in to condemn them and shame them, and pastor stopped his message and said these same things. Listen, I don't know what this is about. This is crazy. And then he just went right back to teaching. Jesus said, I am the light of the world. Good news. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness. Good news. But will have the light of life. Good news. Jesus had come to the temple with the intentions of delivering a message of hope about who he was that day. But it was interrupted by a judgmental, critical spirit. The good news of Jesus Christ was put on pause so someone could play the role of God poorly. That's what happened. I'll say that again. When you choose a critical spirit, you are choosing to play the role of God poorly. You're choosing to decide who someone is. You're choosing to decide based on their actions what they deserve. When we do that, our message becomes the most important, and we assume that we know better than God. All to tell them how wrong they are. In doing what we may believe is the work of God, we hinder that work, the greater work. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, he was a great German pastor, theologian. He was actually arrested, he was tried, and he was executed by Hitler and the Nazis. He says this in his book, The Cost of Discipleship. He says a lot about judgment. And he says that when it comes to realizing the shortcomings of others, I can only do that to the extent that it offers me an occasion for forgiveness. He says, I can make a judgment, but only to the degree it moves me towards forgiveness. Listen to this, and unconditional love. He says, judging others makes us blind, whereas love is illuminating. By judging others, we blind ourselves to our own evil and to the grace which others are just as entitled to as we are. So what's the solution? What kind of exchange are we going to make today? What are we going to trade our critical spirit for? And the answer is right there in verse 11 from the words of Jesus. After all of this condemnation was rained down on this woman, after he says, whoever wants to cast the first stone, you go right ahead, have at it, do it. Verse 11, Jesus looks at her. And as she says, no one is there, no one condemned me, he says, neither do I. Wait, what? Neither do I condemn you. Now, from now on, go and sin no more. The trade, the exchange, is a critical spirit for mercy. Mercy. It's looking at situations and not going so quick to the place where we want to make a decision about who they are, but that we move to a place where we say, mercy. I'm going to replace my criticism with the same response that Jesus would have. And this is what I love. Do you notice that even as he responded in this story, when he said, listen, anyone who wants to throw first, go ahead. Imagine the tension in that moment. Like this woman was thinking, this is it. I'm done. He just told him to cast the stone. But there was a caveat there. There was a little twist. He said, whoever's without sin, go ahead and throw first. His response of mercy sent criticism running. As soon as he said, listen, if you're without sin, go ahead, all of a sudden, some of the older men in the group said, dadgummit, threw the rock down and walked off. Just walked away. You know why? Because mercy wins. Mercy always wins. If you're going to err on the side of judgment or mercy, and listen, I'll even go so far as to say this, if you're going to err on the side of Christian judgment versus mercy, pick mercy. Well, we're supposed to tell. No, listen to me. Hear me out. Yes, I know there's a role for us as Christian brothers and sisters. And no, we cannot simply back away and not call sin, sin. But if you're going to err, if you're unsure whether or not you should say something or not, go with mercy. Amen. Call it out, but go with mercy. Because every single time, mercy will win. You know how I know it? James 2:13. The brother of Jesus. He says, for judgment is without mercy to one who has shown no mercy. But listen to this. I love these words. But mercy triumphs over judgment. Blanket statement, every single time, mercy wins. Mercy triumphs over judgment. You know that the religious leaders, everyone around in that day, were probably wondering, how can he say that? How can he say, neither do I condemn you? How can he get away with that? Because if he does that, then God's violating, if he really is the Son of God, he's violating his own law. Is God unjust? And the answer is no. Because here's the thing, God fully intended for punishment based on the law. Jesus fully intended that there would be a punishment for what this woman would do, but here's the great part, she wouldn't have to bear the weight of it. Mercy would. As Jesus took on the weight, not just of a cross, but the sins of all mankind. That's good news. Was she guilty? Did she sin? Exactly. But this is what I love about mercy, and this is why mercy wins. Hear me, if you hear nothing else today. Mercy wins because mercy can look at and address sin without inflicting condemnation. Mercy can address sin without inflicting condemnation. Jesus didn't say, neither do I, go on. What did he say? Neither do I, go sin no more. He addressed the sin. He said, you need to stop this. You need to cast this off. See, so many times for us, we seek retribution where Christ is going for redemption and reconciliation. Judgment picks up the stone where mercy kneels down and touches the dirt. That's the heart of Christ. But we need to understand something just based on what James said there in that verse. He says mercy triumphs over judgment. Mercy wins, but the exchange for mercy is a war. It's not going to come easily. It's not just going to come to us without some kind of a fight. Triumph indicates there's a battle, right? I struggle with this all the time. I'll have people come to me, and they'll say, you've heard pastors say this too. They'll come to me and they'll say, Nate, I've got this issue going on with my finances or with my marriage or with my kids or so on and so on. Anybody ever have that before? You gone to someone and said, they'll come and they'll say, I've got this, this, and this, and I just don't know what to do. I'm so sad. It's just going to break my, and they're crying. And so I'm like, okay, mercy. I'm not naturally a mercy guy. It's not a gift of mine. So I'm like, okay, mercy. And so I walk through it with them. I pray with them. I'm like, let's do this. Try this. And then they come back. And I'm looking forward to hearing the exciting things that have happened 2 weeks later, 4 weeks later, 6 months later. No, you just don't understand. Nothing's getting better. And in fact, it's just getting worse. And I don't know what I want to do. And I can't help but say, did you do what I told you? Well, no, it's just so hard. It's get out. That's like my response. Just leave. I just want to throttle them in the name of Jesus, but I want to throttle them. Because there's a tension. There's a tension there. I don't know what's happened the last 6 months. I don't know why it was hard. I don't know what they've gone through before that puts them in that place. And that's what leads to this last thing that I want you to catch. Yes, mercy wins, but it's going to be a war. Here's the key. The weapon is one word. Why? Like, what? Why? Just ask that question. Everybody say that word right now on 3. 1, 2, 3. Why? If you want to operate in a greater level of mercy in your life, you have to learn to ask that question. Why? What are you talking about? Here's the thing. I get it. Sometimes people are just thick-headed. Amen? Sometimes. But more often than not, there's more going on than what you see. And if we are to embrace mercy in exchange for a critical spirit, we have to get comfortable with constantly asking why. Why are they doing that? Because they're an idiot. No, that's the judgment. That's the critical spirit. Why are they doing? The next time you're struggling with someone and tempted to write them off, remember this, mercy asks why. That guy is a jerk. Yeah, but why? It's probably not just random. There's more there. She just sleeps around. But why? What is the reason behind that? When mercy becomes your motivation, you can uncover their motivation. When you ask the question, when you begin to see the person, we have to understand that mercy always fights to see the person. My wife was sharing this story with me the other day. We were talking through this message, and I was sharing with her what I was going to say, and she almost kind of teared up a little bit because she was like, that's it. I said, what? She said, I remember this kid that I had. This was 15 years ago. She's been a teacher and educator for years and years and years. And she says, I remember this kid that I had in one of my classes and he was just rough. She actually told me, she said, I remember hearing him talk, and that kid cussed more than I had heard in my entire life. Like, yep, teenagers do that. He was like 7. She said he was just resistant to encouragement. When it came to instruction time, he just shut everything out. He would cause problems. He would get all kinds of upset over everything. Just a mean little cuss. He would do things sometimes just to infuriate them. They would come back from lunch and he would have shoved food in his pockets just to make a mess in the classroom. Just awful, all these kinds of things. Until one day, my sweet wife went to the teacher she was working with and she asked one question. Why? Why does he do this? Why does he act like this? Why does he come in here shoving food in his pockets just to make a mess? Mashed potatoes. Just to make a mess. The teacher looked at her. She said, I'm glad you asked. He actually does that because he's not sure if when he goes home if there'll be anything to eat. He's not doing it to make a mess. But why all the resistance to encouragement? Well, he's actually trying to keep people in an arm's distance because he doesn't want them to know he has the food. Because he wants to make sure he gets to go home with it. From that moment on, Michelle came home every single night worrying about this kid, praying for this kid. Every single day, she found herself actually tempted to help him get the food from the cafeteria so that he could take it home. Why? Because she moved from a place of criticism, to mercy. Why? There's no more beautiful example of that very story, as beautiful as that one is. There's no more beautiful example of that than Jesus hanging on a cross, asking and answering the question as he had a conversation with the Father. And with his arms stretched out wide, he looked down on the very people that had nailed him to that cross and that were set on his death, his execution. And he said, Father, forgive them. Why? Because they don't know. That's mercy. And I want to challenge you today. If you're here, and maybe you've spent your entire life living under weight of judgment, today you can be set free from that. Because there is a God who looks at you with eyes of compassion and mercy and is saying to you, I don't care what you've done. I don't care what you've been through. I don't care what kind of a miserable cuss you are. My mercy wants to reach out to you, and I want to call you my child. And for those of us who already know Jesus Christ, Jesus is saying, hey guys, please, don't hinder my gospel with your critical spirit. Yes, sin is sin. Amen? Yes, it's okay to have a face-to-face conversation with someone and say, don't you see, in love and compassion. But let's tone down the posts on Facebook. You're not bringing anybody to Jesus with how you're hating on everyone else. Every head bowed, every eye closed for just a moment.